Okay, it's 1 o'clock in my computer, so we will call the meeting to order. Today, we're about half in the room in terms of committee members and half online. So we'll let Shanna, if you want to just run the whole roll call, is easiest. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'll do roll call. When I call your name, please acknowledge your presence, and those online, please remember to keep your microphones on mute. Okay, so we have Chair of today's meeting, Director Jackman,
I am here.
Director Tierney,
I am here.
Director Vandenberg,
Good afternoon.
Director Watson,
Good afternoon.
Alternate Director Schmeg,
Here.
Director Newell,
Present.
Director Cunningham,
Present, thank you.
Director Popov,
Present, thank you.
Director Davidoff,
Present, thank you.
Director Hanegraaff, Alternate Director Peterson,
Present, thank you.
Director McFadden. Do we have a representative from the city of Castlegar? What? Director DeBoon.
Good afternoon. Good
Director
afternoon.
Hewitt.
Good afternoon. I am present.
Director Zelznick.
He's online.
Director Zelznick, can you do a sound check?
Present.
Thank you. Director Page.
Present.
Alternate Director Pike.
Present.
Director Lockwood.
He's online.
Thank you. Director Meany.
I am present. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Alternate Director Buhler.
Director Lunn is attending today, alternate Director Lunn.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And then we'll move on. Did we have Director McFadden join yet? Anybody from the city of Castlegar? Okay, move on to the staff. We have CAO Horn. He was.
Here.
And General Manager Wolf.
Present.
Manager Wilson. Present. PJ Evanson.
Present.
Blaine Hamilton. Present. Nathan Shillman.
Present.
Mike Bench. Heidi will join us in a little bit. I'll send her a message on right. So Larry. Larry? No, Larry's on. And Connie Normatsu. Okay, and then we'll have our meeting coordinators, myself, Shannon Heckman. We have Emma Clark, alternate meeting coordinator, and we have Nancy Metz in the background. And we have more meeting coordinators. Anybody I've not acknowledged? Turn it back over to the chair.
Sure, thank you. Then, Uli, maybe you could just explain your new support staff.
Yes, the formal introduction. So, as you may already know, Shanna Ekman is in a new role with our organization. She's going to support the project management group as project management coordinator, mainly looking after the contracts that are maintained by the project management group. With that, she vacated her position, and we have meanwhile hired Emma Clark to replace her in her position as Environmental Services Administrative Coordinator. So Emma is not formally with us yet. She's still supporting other parts of our department. But we have started or used today's meeting as a training opportunity, and she will join us formally on the 29th of April.
Chair, I definitely have a bit of feedback going on between the two.
There might be a volume up on a machine over here.
Mic on that computer.
Is your volume?
There is no mic on this computer.
That's not, I heard a little, something there. Speakers, everybody double check that they're muted.
It's definitely the room in Shanna, according to the WebEx, because it blew down.
No microphone found. It's not connected.
Speakers up here.
Yeah, I could hear a little extra. Volume 0. Speaker.
Yes.
We still see you on the screen as a.
Well, let's carry on. It was just a minor, yeah, or just a minor extra line there. Okay, I think we're ready to carry on now. So, and welcome everybody. I want to acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples within whose traditional lands we're meeting today. And I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. So I see Hannah Graff and Tierney, and to staff, there isn't anything to add, no late items. Not hearing any, all in favor? Any opposed? Looking online for, you're gonna have a lag, but we'll just deal with it. We've received the minutes of February 14th. And would have had March as well.
March canceled.
Oh, that's right. We bounced March. Thanks very much, Shannon. And they went to board. Nothing was picked up as meeting correction. We're good. Item 3, transfer station. Yes.
On that, I'd like to, there was a referral to the March meeting regarding the Nelson transfer station contracts. I was curious if there's an update.
Do you mean the Lakeside Depot
Yeah.
lease? So we do have a new price from them based on square footage and inflation. Unfortunately, the agreement has some incorrect references to other sections, so we've asked them to change it. So we'll be bringing it back in May, pending getting the document back.
If I may, the chair, is it really new pricing? I think it is only the reference, the basis of the calculation of the cost differently. I don't know that the price actually changed.
Not on the agenda for today, though, and will be a future item when it comes back. Come back in March. We didn't have enough business to hold that meeting. I know we're
So we're to a committee that
it didn't exist. So offline staff will make sure that they confirm when it's coming back to us, and we'll see the next agenda. Thanks, Director.
And
So
Chair, I'm
go ahead.
sorry, but can I just flag that you guys are speaking to each other and over each other, so the sound on our end is not good. Please really try not to have side conversations or quiet conversations. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, that wasn't a side conversation. It was a conversation about an agenda that didn't happen in March. But the point was made this morning, and I don't know if the sensitivity can be adjusted up and down, but when speaking to either the near mic or the owl, we had good sound. And absolutely, when turning our head sideways, it seems the sound is not being picked up. So it's not polite to speak to an object instead of the person in front of you, but I guess we'll speak to the object. How's the saying goes? Talk to the hand.
Talk to the owl.
Talk to the owl. So transfer station upgrades, the cusp, Roseberry and Spokane, there's quite a bit here. Maybe I'll go to staff first just to sort of pull it all together. Then I think I'll go to Director Popoff, who wanted to talk about all these 3 moving parts. Amy?
So through the chair, if AJ doesn't mind, maybe he can present about the project, and then I can jump in about the budget and administrative side of things.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, so we hired Sperling Hansen last, we'll call it spring, summer of 2023 to do a design on the Nakusp, Roseberry and Spokane transfer stations. Approximately in the fall, kind of in early October, they provided us with some 50% designs, and we ended up coming to the Joint Resource Recovery Committee back in November. Nathan brought that forward with what at that time was cost estimates of about 50 to 75%. They were truly 50% estimates, but it had been a few weeks following that, so they were more at kind of a 70% stage when they came. At that time, the costs were about 2.1 million, which is what we came to the committee with. When the design was fully finished and finalized in February of 2024, Sperling Hansen had revised their pre-tender estimates up to 2.6 million. And the main reason for that was as they finalized the design, we looked at some of their MOB, demob costs as well as their concrete and asked them to kind of revise that up a little bit because it looked like it was a bit low. And we also asked them to add in a 10% contingency. So all that being said, we put the tender out in at the end of February and closed it at the end of March. We got 3 bids. And of those 3 bids, North Mountain, who's based out of Nelson, BC, was the lowest valid bid. Part of, I guess, the analysis that maybe doesn't show up in this report is that there's really only 2 line items where there's a lot of discrepancy between what we had thought the bids would come in at versus what they did. And so one was the MOB demob. Sperling Hansen had assumed, pick a site, say in a cost, that the MOB demob cost would be 71,000 and North Mountain's price was 215. Likewise for the concrete, they had assumed for all the concrete work and placing of the lock blocks would be about 75,000. They came in at 225. And those numbers were really consistent across all 3 sites. So when talking to Sperling Hansen as well as the contractor, it basically came down to that's the cost of remote work. So working on sites that are remote, they're not close to a major urban center. Concrete is very expensive to get delivered there, and having a crew that's quite a ways away from basically their place of their home and work usually requires a large living out allowance, and either they have to travel back and forth every day or they're living out in accommodations. So essentially, in those 2 line items across all 3 sites and across all the contractors that did provide pricing, that's where basically that additional cost is, and why I think the bids came in higher than generally anticipated. So relative to, I guess, the tendering process, this tender was a typical MMCD tender based off of unit rates, and all the other rates in the tender came in kind of right where we thought they would, again, with the exception of that concrete and mobilization, demobilization. Other than that, I'll maybe flip it back over to Amy and she can talk about the rest of the kind of budget and other non-construction costs.
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks. So through the chair, the remaining, so essentially we did actually get the pre-tender estimate after we had set the budget and last time we had seen the West Committee for budget period. So rather than going back and asking for a budget amendment and having the complications of trying to schedule another budget meeting in that period of time, we thought we would wait to see where the bids actually came in. So sure enough, they did come in higher than expected. They are under the budget, but that is only for the construction. So the other points of the project that are not included in North Mountains are the 4 bins, 2 for Nikusk and 1 for each of the other sites. And then the remainder of the consulting for the construction administration. We also need power upgrades at all the sites, and then there's no contingency remaining. So what we are asking for is a financial plan amendment to increase the transfer from reserves to fund those portions of the project. Nikusk and Slocan were always intended to be partially funded by long-term borrowing, and Roseberry was always intended to be funded by reserves. So now the deficit that the budget has, we're suggesting that all comes from reserves. And so there's a financial plan amendment required to do that. So that's what one of the recommendations is for. And then at this time too, we wanted to get the long-term loan authorization process started. So that is included as the appendix B of the loan authorization bylaw, so that we can have those long-term funds in the fall borrowing intake. So is there anything more to add, or maybe I can just move to questions?
Okay, maybe before we go to questions, we're still getting now that little, some audio thing happening. It's as if 2 mics in this room are cutting in and out. To maybe Chair Watson online, are you able to hear us okay? Or are you getting something cutting in and out?
I can hear you okay. You guys are doing good at speaking to the mic, and I know it's odd not looking at each other, so I appreciate that. The only thing that's occurring is that when you're speaking, there are 2 screens popping up. One is Shanna directly, and one is the boardroom. So I'm not sure if there's 2 mics on in the room. And then Director Zalznick did just mute, but he was unmuted for a bit, so that may have been part of the feedback. That's all I can report so far.
Okay, so long as you guys can hear us online, we're getting a little blip once in a while. I can hear in the background, not sure what. So we have three recommendations. I have a question about the title of one, but I will hold that. Director Popoff, you'd indicated you wanted to speak. I also see Director Davidoff. Director Popoff, did you want to open?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I actually appreciate the explanation that was provided here today. A little bit of variance, but having read the report, to me, it indicates the other costs were not in the budget. So basically, my understanding is if we move this and approve this, we are approving the deficit of the other costs, which is $799,644. And I would appreciate if staff can make a comment on that, whether I'm correct in my assumption.
Go ahead.
So through the chair, the financial plan amendment would ask for the increased revenue to offset the deficit, and would also increase the budgets for each of the three, so that will have both the expenses and revenues required in the financial plan.
Okay, thank you.
With the contingency, correct.
Director Davidoff, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So through the chair to staff, there was mention of long-term borrowing being prepared for consideration in the next budget round. Are we talking about a referendum?
Page, next page.
Yes, yes. So that is just the long-term borrowing. You can either get it in the spring or in the fall. So what we're looking for is the fall. We do not require a referendum. The Local Government Act and the Environmental Management Act allow for long-term borrowing, and I don't have the section, but it is noted in the report that because this was included as a capital project, and the capital funding was noted as long-term borrowing in the resource recovery plan, we do not have to go for a referendum for that long-term borrowing approval. We've already got that approval now that the plan has been approved by the ministry.
Further, Director?
Yeah, so just supplemental, I just want to understand this process. So if the legislation and the relevant ministry approves our waste management plan, then that bypasses the need to go to referendum. That's what I'm hearing. Does this apply to anything else or just waste?
Uli, go ahead.
I don't know if there's other sections that it would apply to, but specifically to resource recovery, so waste services. The resource recovery plan is mandated to have a comprehensive public section in order to be approved. So we had public meetings, we had comprehensive information going out to the public, similar to what you would have as part of a referendum or leading up to a referendum process. That's mandated. We fulfilled the requirement, and that was confirmed through the approval, ministry approval of our resource recovery plan that specifically as well approves the public component of the plan establishment. So that's why the resource recovery plan identified borrowing does not require further processes.
And I chair, one more and I'm done.
Okay, go ahead.
Is there any cap on the amount the borrowing could be?
CAO.
Through the chair, yes, because those numbers should be in the resource recovery plan as perspective.
I didn't hear that. Sorry, Chair.
So through the chair, the resource recovery plan would include amounts as prospective borrowing for capital projects. And that would be the limit of the borrowing.
Okay, so the public has seen the limits.
The chair, correct.
Thank you.
Before going to Director Vandenberg, what might also help here is in these three recommendations, the second one could make reference that it's, either the loan authorization for the upgrades at the cusp or the borrowing for the upgrades, but it is a loan authorization bylaw, 3 readings. So I just to make sure everybody's seeing where that fits here. And of course, that goes to the ministry before adoption. So if there was any comparison to be made, I would expect that's where that would happen. Because we cannot adopt tomorrow. We have to stop at the 3rd reading and then wait for review. And that's by Minister of Municipal Affairs or Minister of Environment.
To the chair of the Minister of Municipal.
Municipal Affairs. So that, I would think Director Davidoff would be the check and balance. If we say we're going to borrow $40 million, that would show up there. Director Vandenberg, floor is yours.
Right, thank you. And added on to this too, as I try to understand what it is that we're doing, upgrading some transfer station sites over a period of time. And when I looked at 188, I'm seeing that proceeds from borrowing for the next 4 years up to $15 million. And so how big does these transfer stations need to get is the first thing that came into my mind. But it just struck me as that's a lot of money for transfer stations. So
Yes, many components. Amy could break them down. There's the landfill, the legacy. Go ahead.
Through the chair, these are the only transfer station projects we have. The remainder are landfill projects. So we have the landfill closure at Anacostia for around $1 million. We have the liner and leachate collection system at Udashania. We have another scale and transfer station modifications at Udashania. So the rest of them are landfill related projects.
Further questions? We don't have any recommendations on the floor. These I was going to maybe I'll check with CEO maybe first. Stuart, it says in committee, these are all vote by West sub-region. Is that correct? Tomorrow the financial, the financial plan amendment one would be all vote tomorrow?
Through the chair, no, the all vote at committee, every vote is all vote at committee. There's no participant.
Yeah, it's no split
Yeah,
participant.
so
these will all
it references West sub-region as the area it refers to, but everybody at the table gets a vote.
So then these are all vote, none weighted. So they could go as a block or they could go individually. So I'm just putting it out there. We don't have any recommendations to vote on at this time or for discussion, but further questions, or does somebody want to make a recommendation?
Director Popoff will make the recommendation. And I'm looking at this. Can I move all of them as a block or?
Yes,
committee?
I believe so. And if somebody calls for a division, we'll go that route. So
Okay.
moving all 3 recommendations as a block.
Yes, I move all 3 recommendations as a block.
Director Main seconds.
Okay, thank you. Discussion on these 3 recommendations. Yes, my only one would be do we want to add words around loan authorization for that second one, so it's really clear what we're doing. Don't see anybody in the room, nobody in chat. No discussion, seeing none, all in favor. Any opposed to these 3 recommendations? Don't see any, so those will all go to board tomorrow as a block, where they will be voted on separately. Item 4, HB tailings facility erosion control works. I gotta go back to my other page here. This was the interesting design in the back of a napkin, I think, some of it.
Chair?
Yes,
Chair.
yes,
Is it Director Hewitt here?
yes.
So, Chair, I, Director Hewitt, wish to declare at this time that I'm not entitled to participate in the discussion or vote on the next item of business on the meeting agenda. That is item number 4. The HB tailings facility erosion control works by reason of Brenton Industries being one of my employers, and that I wish to leave the meeting at this time, and that request that the minutes record my leaving the meeting for the reasons stated.
Thank you. And how do you want us to get back to you, by email or phone call when this item is finished?
I can text Director Hewitt.
Great,
That
thank
would
you.
be great. Thanks
So
very
I'll
much.
just be in the waiting room, or how will that work?
Shannon, did she have to log off or did she go with
No, I've never had a declaration of interest before.
conflict?
Interest.
Easier if you log off and log
Yeah,
back on,
log
if
back
that's
on.
okay.
Yep, I'll do that. Thank you.
There we go. Okay, thanks very much. So is AJ, giving a summary on this one or yourself or Elaine?
With the chair, it's a joint report, so I'll do a brief summary
Go
of
for it.
background.
Absolutely,
Pass
thanks.
it over to AJ.
Okay,
So in December 2023, an extreme weather event caused some damage to the Tilboro area that's located just south of the central landfill. And so although this borough is mostly located within the landfill property, it's also included in the HB Tailings Facility Mines Act permit boundary. So during this weather event, a clay layer on an upper bench of the borough began deeply eroding and some minor sloughing also occurred. The site's qualified professionals, and that's the engineer and the environmental monitor, determined that repair works were needed to correct the issues before they worsened. Additionally, the Mines Act permit needs to be removed from this borough, preferably sooner than later, so that we can get back to using it for landfill needs. So under the Mines Act, in order to remove the permit, the RDCK also needs to demonstrate that this area is slacked in a manner that ensures its long-term physical stability. So to meet that requirement and successfully remove the permit, that erosion and sloughing needs to be addressed first. SRK Consulting was asked to provide a design to mitigate that erosion and sloughing that's occurring. Figure on page 3 of the report outlines the design, and then also the full cost estimate basis is included in attachments, also prepared by SRK. The high-level scope of work will include constructing a 200-meter long line ditch to direct surface water away from that top bench of the borough, repairing those slough areas by removing the slough materials, and then placing a geotextile liner over that area and then covering it with coarse fill, grading the clay erosion exposure, and then also covering that area with a liner and fill, and then finally hydro-seeding the entire area of disturbance for the project. And with that, with the chair's permission, I'd like to pass it to AJ.
definitely. AJ, what would you like to add?
Through the chair, yeah, maybe just a couple things. Just for remembrance, we initially tried to finish this HB tailings project off in 2021. We ended up having an atmospheric river event that fall that delayed that. So we moved into 2022. We then had a couple more extreme weather events in 22, and then another couple more in 23, as Elaine mentioned. So our goal since finishing this remediation project has been to get some seed and some vegetation growing. And what we have found is that as long as the seed is on like a low slope or it's in a protected area, we get really good vegetative cover that gets established. Anywhere where it's on a steeper slope or it's kind of exposed to the sun, gets baked quite a bit. There's a lot of clay. We get very poor cover established, very poor germination. So I guess the goal of what we're trying to get here is with this procurement and how SRK has designed it is that we want a lot of this seed to be done in the spring, so that what we'll do, and that's why we've kind of hired separately a contractor to do the hydro seeding, is that we want the contractor to come in, do the work, and then when there's an ideal weather window that's post freshet, but before kind of the hot summer temperatures, we come in, get everything finished hydro seeded so that we get kind of that germination with the higher temperatures in the spring. It goes dormant in the summer, and then we actually get good kind of root vegetative growth in the fall, so that when we do get, the fall and the spring events, that all the seed doesn't wash away. So yeah, relative to that, we put this out as a unit rate tender. SRK, their quantities were quite conservative. So again, with Brenton being the low valid bid, their unit rates are very, they're the lowest out of all 4 of the bidders. And, if any of the quantities are higher or lower, we feel that there's not a lot of risk in exceeding the budget that's been established. So I think that's all I've got. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So we have the staff recommendation, either somebody wanting to move the recommendation or other questions for staff. Director Schmidt.
I move the recommendation.
Moved and with a second, Director Newell, discussion on the recommendation and or questions for staff.
Sorry, Chair, can you just clarify what recommendation was moved? I did not hear that.
Okay, well, the recommendation on this is staff authorized to enter into a services agreement with Brenton Industries for HB tailings erosion control works, $87,490, and further Chair and Corporate Officer authorized to sign. And that paid through S187. That's the recommendation on the item 4 on the agenda.
Thank you.
Chair,
Yes, Director Lockwood, and I see you. Is it difficult to hear still? Go ahead.
no, it's not, but I did put my hand up and I also put my name in chat. So I'm just wondering
Yes.
how to get on the, because I wanted to speak before it got put on the floor, but I would still like to speak since now I'm,
Go ahead. I just noticed you in chat here. It's difficult to see the hand on the screen. But I can
That's
see
what
it
I did.
now looking at the top corner, but I was watching chat. I saw one at 128. Shannon, you would have noted that. Go ahead, Director Lockwood, with some latitude, having a recommendation on the floor. Go ahead, please.
thank you. Through to staff, I'm just wondering, as we go through this process with HB, and this is a sensitive subject, but as we go through this process with them, we have always had different things come forward to us in many different reports. And my concern would be, without having to spend hours of going back through back reports, was this not something that was identified as a risk and for the slope and that through engineers in the past? And if it was, how did we mitigate and how and how are we going to make sure that in 2 years we're not in the same position again?
Who wants to take that one? Elaine or
AJ?
AJ? AJ, did you have a response?
Sure, I can take that. All the back sloping that has been done and the design that's been done by SRK has been done to basically generally accepted engineering standards. So the slopes, how they were left and how they were vegetated with the clay material that's there should have taken some, I guess, form of seed. I guess we've always struggled at the central or at the HB site with the clay, how when it's dry, it's really hard, and when we get a bit of precipitation, it basically turns to jello. So once you disturb that, it's very difficult to get vegetation to regrow. So one of the items that we did mention on the report is that we are planning on using, and I don't know if Elaine can update or not, but we are planning on using some of the material that's coming out of the compost facility to basically amend that upper area so that we actually have a better kind of vegetative medium that we can actually grow seed on. Right now, it's very difficult to get seed to take on clay. So the goal is, that's, I guess, one of the changes that we've made currently is that we are going to be basically amending kind of the top surface so that we're adding something that seed can grow in, rather than just relying on hydro seed to be the basis of what the seed is germinating inside of.
Further, Director Lockwood?
Please. Also, are we just relying on hoping that grass and stuff like that, or have staff looked at that we plant some trees or something like that that actually will grow some red osier or anything like that is not invasive but can actually give some stability to the ground? Because as I'm hearing is that we're just going to be looking at this 2 to 3 years possibly or sooner down the road. So I'm just wondering, grass is not going to stop. It doesn't have a deep root. doesn't matter, the organics, we're gonna hear later on how CKIS is dealing with invasive species, and some of it is coming from people that are bringing or putting in our organics. So I'm concerned that we're just doing this, spending this money to turn around and have to deal with an invasive species later on. That do we do something in planting trees or something in that area?
Elaine, go ahead.
Through the chair, so the seed mix that was used was approved by the Ministry of Mines, since this part of the site is within that Mines Act permit boundary. So it's 50% native seed blend and a 50% supposedly quick establishing mix. We did put in our initial permit application to be able to amend the top layer of soil with our chip yard and garden material. But the Ministry of Mines denied that request due to the risk of invasive species being in that material. So we're kind of left with having to go with just what's there unless we want to truck in huge amounts of topsoil. So AJ did touch on that we were looking to use some of the, not compost from the compost facility, but we do have a very, very large pile of composted biosolids at the site, and so we're going to have those tested to see if they meet industrial land standards. And if they do meet that application requirement, then we can use that across the surface of the boro as a really great soil amendment.
Thank you. Further, Director?
No, thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed to the recommendation? So I'm not seeing any. That is carried. We'll go to the board tomorrow. Item 5, also HB Tailings Facility Engineering Contract. Report from Elaine on the errors and omissions to do with the liability insurance and deductibles. You want to give us a real quick overview of what we're looking for here?
Do my best. I'm not an insurance broker. So this is about SRK's 2021 consulting services agreement for the HB Tailings Facility. Again, that's the engineer of record and engineering works contract. So this contract was signed in 2021, and the contract was based on an old template. And that template only references commercial general liability and professional liability insurance in the amounts of $2 million. But it doesn't reference any deductibles or the in aggregate amount of coverage that are required within the RBCK's insurance policy. So within our insurance policy, high risk contracts such as this one requires $5 million per occurrence, $10 million in aggregate, and a $50,000 deductible for that professional liability insurance. SRK is able to meet the commercial general liability insurance requirements, but they're unable to meet the in aggregate coverage amount of $10 million or the $50,000 deductible required in the policy for that professional liability insurance. Due to SRK's size and their capacity to self-insure for the deductible, staff feel that it's still within the RDCK's business interest to increase the professional liability deductible from $50,000 to $500,000, and are requesting that the board supports this modification. Staff are also requesting that the board support an increase, am I getting this right? A decrease, sorry, a decrease in the professional liability in aggregate coverage amount, and that decreases from 10 million to 5 million to more closely align with the risk of SRK's remaining works for 2024. Thank you.
Okay, so either anyone want to move a recommendation or questions? I'm just checking chat. Director Davidoff, please go ahead, and then Schmidt.
Yeah, this was a really interesting one, like follow the bouncing ball, right? So just so I got it clear in my head. So what we're doing is And first question is this happening in the middle of a contract? Through the chair to staff?
Through the chair. Yes, so there's been quite a lot of changes to our contracts process since the contract was signed in 2021. And there are some of these insurance items that were not captured in that older language or minor errors in the coverage amounts. And now that we have to request the insurance policy updates each year, and we have now changes to ensure that we're meeting the insurance policy requirements. There has been a few of these changes in some of the contracts that I work on. Most of the time, consultants are able to meet these new insurance requirements, or for like moderate or medium to low risk contracts. We can do those through the CAO or senior managers. And so some of those adjustments have had to happen. In some cases now with newer contracts, some consultants have brought forward before the contract is signed that they can't meet our insurance requirements, able to do a modification ahead of time if that's the case.
Okay, and my supplemental chair?
Go ahead.
So what the recommendation states is that we're gonna increase the deductible by 10 times. And we're gonna reduce the coverage in half. From 10 million to 5 million, is it through the chair, is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct, and that's the,
It's, you're reducing the aggregate by 50% of the main insurance portion.
correct.
Okay, and Chair, I do have one more question.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, and the $500,000 deductible, you said that the engineering firm would be self-insuring that and not the RDCK, is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct, yes.
Okay, and then last questions to Stuart. Does this all
Yes,
sound good?
last question. Okay, go ahead, Director.
So
CEO,
Stuart,
yes.
CEO, does this sound like you're on the board of MIABC? Like, are you good with this?
Through the chair, it's very consistent with what's going on. A $10 million aggregate, if you got it, would bankrupt you in terms of the premiums that you pay. So it's consistent with what's going on, and I don't think 5 million is unreasonable based on the fact that this contract is from now until mid-November. Is that right?
Yeah. Okay, so I do have an additional speakers list here. I have Schmink, Vandenberg, and McFadden. This also may result in a request for a policy review on insurance, depending, what's available to any of these companies. That said, Director Schmink.
Good answer, thank you.
Okay, Director Vandenberg.
Same, but my wonder is, who is this really benefiting? Who's accepting the liability on this? But I think CAOs did speak to it. But I also would like to comment, this stuff needs to be understood at the point of the contract being finalized. And these are all basic elements within an agreement. That's it, thanks.
Hey, Director McFadden. Oh, sorry, first, Uli, yes, comment on.
I just generally want to speak about insurance requirements and the risk that as an organization that we take on. In my personal opinion, our risk is a lot higher down the road. These companies don't exist anymore or change their insurances or whatever else. Right? This is not an insurance in perpetuity that can change after the contract term. You may have an insurance case then, and you don't necessarily have the same insurance coverage in place. We have had that repeatedly where we rely on insurance and then the organization may no longer be there or was swallowed up by another company and you don't know exactly what that means for the insurance. So the down the road insurance, having one, is the more important part, in my opinion, than the immediate higher amount in the short term. So these are longer term risks that we typically try to insure. And we can't forget that as professionals, all these engineers carry an insurance outside of the insurance as an organization. But it's not the only insurance coverage in place, so should they clearly make mistakes as a professional, there's other insurance coverages in place as well.
Except in the case of criminal negligence, which every professional has to be aware of.
So supplemental
Go
to
ahead.
that, so then that becomes the reality of negotiating contracts is that what used to be fairly standard things in terms of getting it written in correctly, insurance is a moving target that you'll have to weigh through the process of that agreement from time to time, which has a direct effect on what the costs on delivering those services are at the end and the future liability exposure. So that's quite an interesting target that's now moving around a lot.
Or the willingness for anybody to bid on our work. And it was difficult to get this position, this responsibility filled in the first place, which we have to have under quite
concerning, actually.
So then if we'll move on to Director McFadden, the floor is yours.
All of my questions have been asked. Thanks.
Okay, and then I see, sorry, I gotta move Chad along here in my, okay. Just Director DeBoon noting he's back. So further discussion. Did we move and second this? Not yet. Not yet. So Director Page.
I'll move it.
For discussion purposes, and do we have a second? Director Newell, thank you. Director Page.
Through the chair to staff. So on that long-term liability question, is this a place where we get additional insurance from MIA for some of these projects? Is there a vehicle within that? How do we cover ourselves in the most effective fashion?
So through the chair, you mean after the contract's done, the work's been done, something might come down later on?
Yeah.
That is one of those things where you cross that bridge when you come to it. It's no different than a failed foundation for a building inspection file that we might have. It might take 5 or 6 years for that to come about. Now, granted, we didn't have an agreement with the contractor, but if that happens, normally the resident will come back after us, their contractor, their designer, et cetera. And as we said, hopefully they're all still in business. And if some of them aren't, then we take on a significant portion of that risk for sure. Because our risk, even during a construction job, getting course of construction insurance, it ends when you've got a lockup. Like you don't keep that insurance going on. So really it's about, hoping that you've got an entity that they're bound by their professional organizations, they're continuing on in their business, and they would have their general commercial insurance still active so that if something did come back, there's a vehicle for them to be part of that action should there be an issue. Okay. Yeah.
It is also possible to purchase winding down insurance for a retirement period, where they look at a descending cost based on what is the risk of something coming to light 2 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later. That's also available to certain professions. So before us, we have that recommendation to increase the deductible and reduce the aggregate. Further discussion on the recommendation. Don't see anybody in chat, nobody in the room. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Any opposed? So this will go to the board tomorrow as well. Thank you. Good item 6, resource recovery facilities, noxious weed treatment options. So Nathan, you were in the room there, you are. Thanks. You provided the report and recommendation, recommending option 1 from the report. You want to give us a quick notes of how you got to that recommendation?
Certainly. Good afternoon, and through the chair. My goal here is to keep this summary as short and concise as possible given the extensive agenda today. So the purpose of this report is to present the management options and recommendations provided by the Central Kootenay Invasive Species Society, or CKIS, for invasive plant management, HB tailing site and resource recovery facilities in 2022. CKIS has been providing an invasive plant management program for the RDCK since 2019. Services provided include education and outreach, invasive population monitoring, and invasive plant control. Controlling invasive plants at RDCK resource recovery facilities is needed for several reasons. The BC Weed Control Act establishes that landowners and land occupiers must control noxious weeds. HB tailing site permit has a requirement for invasive plant control. The RDCK wants to be a good neighbor by reducing and eliminating spread of invasives to adjacent lands. There's a desire to reduce site safety risks by eliminating invasives that can cause harm to the public. And we want to ensure the compost that the regional district has started to produce is free from invasive plants and seed. The goal in invasive plant management is to reduce invasive populations year after year. This can be challenging at resource recovery sites. However, through the continuation of a robust program such as the one offered by CKIS, it can be expected that invasive populations will decline, control efforts, and costs should reduce over time. There are two main methods of invasive plant management: chemical control and mechanical control. Chemical control involves the use of herbicide to eradicate invasive plants. This method has proven to be the most effective both in terms of invasive control and cost to the RDCK. Mechanical control involves physical removal of plants through mowing, hand pulling, or excavation. While this method can be more effective than herbicides for specific invasive species, such as Scotch broom, it is generally more costly and less effective than herbicide. For 2024, CKIS has provided two options for invasive control. The recommended option, option 1, primarily involves the use of herbicide at most sites and some mechanical control at specific sites. Option number 2 primarily involves mechanical treatment and monitoring and limited herbicide use. Following herbicide treatment at the Marblehead Transfer Station in 2023, there's members of the public contacted the RDCK to express their concern with the use of herbicides in the area. Given these concerns, mechanical treatment of invasive species will be the recommended option for the Marblehead Transfer Station in 2024. The cost for administering this program is in line with previous year's work, with some increases apparent due to increased labor costs, herbicide costs, and administrative costs. Treatment option number 1 is estimated at $51,124. Treatment option number 2 is estimated at $60,663. While both options are above the amount budgeted for 2024, staff will work with CKIS to determine if slight program modifications are possible to reduce the costs and stay within budget. There may also be capacity within the contract services account in each service area to fund minor excess costs. If not, staff will return to the committee to request a financial plan amendment. Both treatment options carry with them environmental considerations. Using herbicide has the potential to present a risk to human health, wildlife, and environment. However, this is mitigated through careful selection of herbicides being used, hiring experienced certified pesticide applicators, and by using the minimal amount of chemicals possible. For example, in 2023, only 8 liters of undiluted herbicide was used on resource recovery facilities across the entire RDCK. Employing mechanical control methods has the potential to compound invasive plant problems if not done completely or enough times, or if improperly timed, which could lead to increased control costs in the future. This could be difficult to mitigate as the regional district has to rely on third-party contractors to do most of the mechanical treatment. Extra time and effort would be needed to properly manage the mechanical control program. So 2 options being presented for invasive plant control. Option 1 is primarily use herbicides and some mechanical treatment to control invasives. The pros of that are more effective control of invasive species overall and lower cost to RDCK. The cons would be the potential concern from public and site staff regarding the use of chemical herbicides. Option number 2 involves mechanical control methods at most sites and limited herbicide use at the HB tailing facility. The pros of this is limited herbicide use across the RDCK. The cons would be increased cost, especially where not weed is present on sites, limited control efficacy, And then some areas may present a challenge in finding local personnel and equipment to do the mechanical treatments. Staff recommends proceeding with option number 1. That concludes my summary. I welcome any questions and back to the chair.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. So I have a speakers list, Watson, Lockwood, Vandenberg, myself. What I'd like to avoid, because this is a situation where somebody may jump in and make one recommendation and we'll modify the wording 18 times because we'll say accept this, accept that, accept that. Go in a big circle and come up with a hybrid option 1.5. So if we could go through the speakers listing and try and gauge the level of concern, because it's going to be around herbicide or not. Or if you want, because, you know, Robert's rules, you can jump in and make any recommendation you like. But I would rather personally here just kind of get a gauge instead of saying, well, let's do this option with this and then have 15 amendments. So that said, Chair Watson, the floor is yours.
Well, I won't move the motion I was going to move.
Yeah, it's entirely up to
It's
you.
okay.
It's just,
I know.
I fear where it may end up. And
I can respect your process and I'll just go ahead and make my comments and refrain from the motion, but my comment will tell you what motion I was going to move. So my primary concern is that removing one environmental toxin with another environmental toxin just behooves us to a continuing environmental toxin issue. Herbicides are known to deal with immediate issues and can remove them in the immediate future, but long-term from a land management and a soil stewardship perspective, they are not sustainable approaches. My further concern is as we are going to be revisiting the climate action issues tomorrow, and we have a strong commitment to environmental practices, I definitely would not be in support of herbicide use on these facilities. I do want to thank staff. The issues that were raised at Marblehead last year, the primary one for me was around the fire risk because it significantly dries out plant material. And if it's not removed immediately, you have a fire risk in an area with no fire service. And there were staff concerns over the use of the herbicides, but our resource recovery staff were fantastic at responding and they engaged directly with the concerns. So I do thank staff for doing that. And I thank you for working with them on ensuring that what occurs at Marblehead is conducive to best practices up there. I just encourage us to do it at all sites. Specifically for the compost site, you definitely should not be using herbicides at a compost site. Those do not leave the land. They stay in the land. They're carried by the water. So mechanical at Central should be essential. I appreciate it at Marblehead, and I would strongly encourage we do not use herbicides whatsoever when mechanical is an option. We also have projects up the lake where they are doing invasive plant management through native plant planting. So you get both aspects of removing a toxic plant and encouraging the native plants, and they are very successful with it. So I think the herbicide is the old way of doing things, and there's new innovations. At minimum, it should be mechanical, not herbicides. I will not move option 2, but that is what I would have done at this time.
Okay, thank you for that, because it could end up being modified 4 ways. And that was a lot of detail I didn't have a timer on. I will note, I see Director Fike, you did put a comment in chat here on the speakers list. Just to note though, on the one screen up on the wall, I can see your hand raised, and on my computer, 1.5 feet from my eyeballs, there's no hand raised. So please, everybody, if you put your name in chat, it's much easier. When you raise a hand, it's easy to miss it. And I don't know why this screen is different from that one, but that's the way the system rolls. So the speakers list is now then Lockwood, Vandenberg, Fike, Jackman. Please go ahead, Director Lockwood, and Page. Before me, but please go ahead, Director Lockwood.
Thank you. And through the chair, I just have some, after reading the report, I have a couple of questions. So right now, we open our sites to having people bring yard and garden waste. And in that yard and garden waste could be a lot of noxious weeds that we're trying to control in our sites. How does staff right now control those to make sure that we're not moving them just from one area to another area, or it's not that we are, that public is not moving them in that, would be my first question. And then I have a second question.
So I'm not sure who can best answer that. If there's that, Nathan,
Chair,
go ahead.
so part of the program offered by CKIS involves training of staff, and that would be offered in-house or online. And part of that is to help educate our wastewaters and other resource recovery staff in identifying noxious weeds or invasive plants. Ideally, we don't want any invasive plants going into the yard and garden reception areas. Instead, we want those going into the landfill areas and being buried where they're less of a problem. That said, it's extremely difficult, especially if people bring a truckload of yard and garden waste to pick out those invasive species. We can certainly do our best, but I don't think you'll ever fully reduce or fully eliminate invasive species coming and ending up where they shouldn't be at our sites. And that's part of the challenge that I expressed in the report, that given the nature of our facilities, there's always going to be disturbance of soils. There's always invasive plants arriving on the site through various ways. So it really is a challenge, and I think it will be an ongoing issue that we'll have to manage continually.
Okay.
Follow-up Director Lockwood, go ahead, yes.
Yes, thank you. The reason I brought up that last question is Otashina didn't have the blackberry in 2022 and now has it in 2023. And same with the North African flower or grass at Central. So we're gonna always see that. And what I'm hearing is that staff is going to be educated, but as the staff person said, somebody could bring a truckload and nobody know. I had one other question. When we talk about mechanical, and I've brought this up before and had some laughs, but had some yays, is have we considered goats?
Who wants to take that, Uli? Because I want a goat. Questions? No large site.
We have not tried that, and to be clear, there would be several stumbling blocks on a waste facility in regards to risk to the animals, but maybe other risks as well that are would need it to be considered. There's likely many options of controlling weeds, but what we need to consider in all of these options is realistic and economical limits to using other methods than the herbicides. So it is a cost effectivity measure to use herbicides, and that is, it was pointed out, we ideally would be able to sustain, i.e. food production without them, but reality is if you have a 100-acre field and doing that as a manual control, it's not cost feasible. And this is a little bit the situation we have too, not because we have these huge sites, but because we have relatively small budgets for what we are doing. And what Nathan introduced are compromises in regards to addressing concerns that were expressed with the two options that he put before us. So, like I said, theoretically, you can do it all with manual control for animals or goats or whatever, but all of these would require a lot more staff and other cost to use these methods, and that's what we need to balance and weigh.
Chair, I don't believe that my question was totally understood. I didn't ask if we've tried the goats.
You consider.
I'm asking if has staff gone out to find out? Is there a business out there that people would bring in their goats or whatever and do that kind of work? As we know, we just heard from staff before, is that we're going to be dealing with this forever because we cannot control what people bring in and get into our organics or get not put in the burying of ground. So I'm good with that, but that is where I was going with that, not if we've done it or not. Thank you.
I have added Director Page to the speakers list, but I think the reason you put it, you have an example, a case example, Director Page, of using grazing for cattle on a large field?
The city of Nelson put through an application last year to the EBCM climate resilience, community resilience program, I believe is the name of it, for fire mitigation, specifically looking at what are the opportunities to deal with some of the terrain with goats. We looked at it seriously out of Fernie. It ended up being really expensive.
Okay, noted, thank you.
And if I may add, there is examples out in the industry where closed land roads, for example, have been where they use sheep to control the vegetation because they often have steeper slopes, so they need specialized equipment and whatever. So that in that case, large areas, it can be cost effective. But in our situations that we have the multitude of small sites, this does not appear a feasible option.
So returning to the speakers list, I'm just gonna make sure I got it right. Vandenberg, Pike, Page, do you want to be back on the speakers list for the other issue? And Newell, and then maybe myself, might get well beyond what I had to say. Director Vandenberg.
Great, thank you through the chair. Good report. Love the detail. A couple things that I think is an opportunity to provide, which is what I'm going to talk about. So the 14 sites, CKS did a good job of going in and identifying the invasive. Hired Morrow or Kootenai to actually do the work. Have done it for a number of years, according to yourself, but there is no successes reported or changes from year to year. So what's the program doing? How is it working? Are you doing one thing that shows more promise over another? That's not in there. Additionally, you referred to it a couple of times, more efficient than the cost of internal staff. But you didn't specify what that would be. How much would that cost? What is the time, that sort of thing. Okay, so that's missing as well. Just those couple of things. The differences between one option and the other is 17%. It's not a big number. But I do like the idea of the conversation around the goat. There are some sites that probably make sense. That if you've got a local guy put it out, put his goats on there, you might be surprised. We've had goats, we've had sheep, not sheep, make it goats. You might be surprised, very surprised as to what may take place. So don't say no to it. Keep it open-minded. The last comment that I would like to suggest is, to me, this is a cost per square foot type of thing. So in this case, it's per acre. But there is no acres in the 14 sites. You don't say how big they are. So I can't, from my mind, I can't drill it down to how much that is. And then from year over year, I can see if you tried something different, it drops the cost per acre, or however the metric is. That's significant. Those are helpful things because Director Lockwood is correct. This is not going away. This is always going to be here. It's just a matter of being willing to try things and just record the metrics so that we can see year over year how things have changed. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
So Nathan, I see you took notes. Did you have anything for future years that's top of mind right now, or?
Well, in regards to progress, through the chair, in regards to the progress, I feel like we're still playing catch up from, having just implemented this program 5 years ago. 2019 is when CKS had started, and it's a hard thing to gauge because you may eliminate one species on site over the course of a couple of years, while a new species finds its way in. So I think in some ways that it's hard to measure that, especially as we're just, getting this program rolling, in a distant manner. But definitely that's something I will look into, see where we have progressed over the years and moving forward. Well, for the acreage, I believe it was about 3.5 acres of total land treated. That those metrics are tracked, as well as the amount and different herbicides used. So we can provide that desired.
So I'm sorry.
Okay, so all those sites add up to 3.5 acres.
3.5 acres of land was treated.
A larger.
Yes. So of course you have a site, the whole thing's not covered in weeds. There's a patch here and there's a patch there, but those things are measured by.
And what is an indicator for that, if I may through the chair, is the number that he mentioned, 8 liters used in an annual program of the herbicide. So that gives you a bit of an indication how much is actually treated through herbicides.
Thanks. Director Fike, the floor is yours. You were looking for a distinction between containing and controlling, I believe.
Yeah, through the chair to Nathan, I guess, in this CCAS report, and I did email them, but didn't get a response yet. I just wondered if I was watching somebody that was containing a noxious species versus somebody who's strategically controlling them, what would I see on the ground? Just a question, Nathan. Thank you.
Through the chair, I'm not exactly sure containing. When I hear containing, I'm thinking more of, I guess, creating barriers for spread rather than a chemical treatment. But I'm not familiar with all the containment methods used for these invasive species.
Go ahead, further. Yes.
Yeah, I guess I'll wait for an email from CCAS. I would echo Director Vandenberg just about some sort of metrics to see if the programs were succeeding or not. Also echo Chair Watson. That's it for me.
Thank you. I think the province uses contain and monitor, which to me just means they've given up on a geographic area. Director Page.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the recommendation to move it if there was a seconder. I just want to highlight a few things that stood out for me, at least, in that it's not across the board that all herbicide chemicals are persistent over a long term, depending on the makeup. And when we look at the fact that we are working with CKIS, who are experts in this field, they're committed to this work. Look at the qualified contractor call that they've done to put those contractors on a list, and the requirements within that call of their compliance with the invasive plant pest management plan for something here in BC and everything that goes along with that. I have confidence that staff and CKIS can work together to identify the right chemicals to be used when they need to be used, where they need to be used, and leverage the mechanical mechanisms that are appropriate to deal with our budget. My big flag would just be confirmation from staff that we have a really strong eye on what those chemicals are that are long-term persistent over more than a year's worth of time, and that they're making sure that that's the stuff we're avoiding, without just taking any and all chemical applications off the table, because I think they have a place and they are effective and they will save money and help us control this faster, which is also a value that we need to chase after, or at least that's something I think we need to work on. So I'm comfortable with option one and would move it seconder.
We have a second for option one. So option one is seconded. So continuing with speakers list, we have Newell and myself, and I may have missed somebody if you just come to chat, but Director Newell.
wouldn't have moved to option one, but I would have said, Director Page had not spoken before me, that I was fully in support of option one. And I would have said similar things to what Director Page said, although not being an expert, I would have couched it by saying, I'm not sure everything around chemicals is that bad. In fact, I think it's good. And some of the information we've received in the past about carcinogenic things in California and what have you has quite a larger backstory than might just be seen in a headline where a few $1 million, hundreds of millions was paid to cancer victims when you dig deeper into it. So CKIS, I've been part of the organization for a number of years, and their diligence is beyond reproach. Their skill is beyond reproach. And I think that the concerns that was raised by Director Page about using the right chemical, the right thing, and when mechanical works is all part of what CKIS does on an annual basis as the organization continues to mature, grow, and try and deal with this very challenging situation. So it's moved and seconded. I'm speaking in favor.
Okay, I see Director Watson for the second time. I'm gonna go for the first time, unless I miss somebody. I don't have anybody else. And I hope I haven't introduced a bad process, but my thoughts are, I read in the report, some people at Marblehead say don't use herbicides, so the assumption is, well, we won't do that. I have emails from East Shore where people read about Fortis and Hydro's herbicide programs, and they said, oh, we shouldn't do this anywhere by anyone. So this is where we get into option 1A, 1B, 1C, 2A, 2Bs. So why, if a couple of people said we shouldn't use herbicides here, that's off the table, but it's in other locations. To go even further, I think it's the Creston site that option 1 is more expensive for Creston landfill than option 2. Bit of a curiosity. So this is where my position would be more to, let's avoid the herbicides, because we can't say what we understand or don't understand. We know there's a huge sensitivity and some controversy about what the actual effects are. And instead of going about it saying, well, we use, if the general program was set up with no herbicide, and then we come and debate only the exception, as opposed to saying, well, let's use herbicide in a lot of areas, and then we're all gonna want to amend to remove this and remove that site. I'd rather we started with, in general, we're gonna do what we can, as far as we can, as well as we can with mechanical methods. And then where we see a larger problem than that, I'd rather have a separate discussion about herbicide at this site because of these specific reasons. Herbicides can't be used, I would assume, at crop rotation because it's the same price both sides. The only other way to do it is say, well, I see this as a recommendation with whatever it is, 13 or 14 separate components, and I want division. I'm not going to do that because unfortunately I'm chairing the meeting. If it was Tom or Walter, maybe I would do that just to see where it went. But it's there we go. Thank you. But it's almost unintentional to say some people say we don't want this, so it's not even on the table for discussion. So I'm gonna leave it there. I'm opposed to option 1. Director Watson, you let Manager Wilson go ahead, and then Chair Watson, you're back in the speakers list.
Thank you. So through the chair, I guess, and Nathan can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're putting forward here is a recommendation of who we're seeing as an expert in the field. So they have been assessing the properties specific to the types of invasives that they have and the controls that they see as the most effective. I actually don't feel like Marblehead was changed only because of those comments. I think they assessed the types of invasives there and the different methods of it. It can be viewed as that. We mentioned in the report because it was very clearly commented, and there was comments from the public about it. So we wanted to be addressed that was something, if those members of the public were reading it, they can see it was what they were expecting. It wasn't necessarily a change because of that. And I think that's what we're putting forward here is the recommendation from what the experts assessing individual sites. And, you know, the thing that we have been really closely working with them on is ensuring when they're using it or when the sites are closed, that they're using is limited. So they're not going broadcast spraying, they're spot treating and using as little as herbicides as possible. And the other thing we have to, what other than what was mentioned in the report about these are requirements of us as good land managers, and some of it is requirements of our permits and various things, so that we're very much required to do this management, is almost all of these sites are landfills. They're industrial sites. So there's another layer that would be put on here if it was more residential neighborhood or a park or something like that. So it just wanted that.
Thank you. Just thinking, before going to Watson for the second time, Director Hanegraaff, did you wish to speak or not, or just picking up on body?
Screaming of body language, but yeah, no,
Go ahead.
I struggle with it too, because of Budashenya and, you know, people were up in arms when Fortis was spraying. I think us using herbicides would not be well received in Area J. It really does cause me concern.
Go for the second time, Watson, and then Vandenberg. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Well, obviously I'm opposed to this motion because I was going to move option 2, but out of respect, I did not. So option 1's on the table. I just wanted to reiterate, Amy did say some of the things I wanted to say in regards to Marblehead. It was not just opinion. There was actually a fire risk, and that was determined valid. There were staff concerns about in terms of the facility operators there. And there were actually experts in the region who could provide different ways of managing it that were well received. And that's what staff worked with. So it's not just opinion. It is actually looking deeper than just the one entity that is available that is doing this as a business. I don't want to discount CKIS, but they are the only entity. Does that mean that's the only option in management? It's not. There are actually some really amazing successful cases where they're showing to change the pH of the soil, which is how you change the plants that show up. As a former farmer and someone who's studied soils, yes, herbicides are broad spectrum. There are ones that don't leave the type of residuals that some do that are toxic. But there's definitely ways to manage land for sustainable results that don't require a constant application, which is my primary concern. When you change the pH, when you change the way you manage the soils, and again, native plant replanting, different mechanical ways, goats are actually really valid. They have been used in other municipalities, but our geography, and there are a lot of other considerations, they have been quite successful. They're also really great at fire mitigating. So there's a lot of other ways you can do this that actually increase the values in terms of quality of land, soil, long-term, fire mitigation. And herbicides are the quick way of doing this. And I don't agree with it. So I'm opposed to this recommendation. I think we need to think broader than CKIS. They do good work, but there's other ways of doing this. And we have those experts in this region. They're just not the one entity providing this as a business. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe just first, again, I know speakers list is growing again. So now I have for the first time, Popoff and Maine, and for the second time, Vandenberg, Lockwood. This is going to come to a vote pretty quick, I think, but of course you're still able to speak to the issue and express your opinion. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And Director Vandenberg touched on this as a comment in the report where we mentioned doing some of this in-house. So I guess what this is that there was an invasives program brought to the board that didn't advance as far as I think some have suspected it might. This is a program that we were already advancing on specific because of our requirements and our permits and things like that. So I've written down lots of notes. I'm more than happy to investigate it, but I want to be clear that that's a scope of work that's not in our work plan. So if you want to add that to our work plan, we'll have to have a further discussion about direction from the board to do that and include that. So we don't have the staff to investigate all of these different options. We don't have the staff with the same expertise that some of the CKIS staff have, or we don't have the tools that their consultants have. So we can do all of these things. It's just not in our capacity or was not directed to us previously. So that's what I wanted to.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go for the first time, Popoff and then me, Director Popoff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. When I take a look at our budgets, in 2024, West has allocated $9,000, and even option 1 is in excess of that amount. And my preference would be option 2. So what do we do? Do we have to do another amendment to our budgets?
Is it a separate line item, this work in the budget, or is it part of operations in general? In case no, we wouldn't amend the budget.
Through the chair, it's included in the contracted services, which is, they're very large accounts in all these subregions. I don't know that we would need to do a financial plan amendment in future years, but we would modify things based on the direction. Yeah, I think it would take a little bit more consideration, especially if we're investigating other methods. I don't have the cost of option 1 versus the cost of option 2. I think we could probably fit in without a financial plan amendment.
Okay, thank you. Further, Director Popoff.
Yeah, I really did not understand the response correctly. Is option 1 is $9,000 that we budgeted for, and it's $12,000. So my understanding is, based on Amy's response, we can accommodate that under contracted services. But when we go to option 2, it's almost double the amount. Can we accommodate that within our contracted services, or do we have to do a budget amendment?
If I may, so we've got to realize that these are 3 very large services with very large contracted services budgets. And if you look specifically only at the weed control part, you're right, that this is in your case here, almost 100% increase. But if you look at the contracted services overall, that includes things like landfill contracts with hundreds of thousands of dollars of contracts, you are able to accommodate a $8,000 or $9,000 increase within that budget. If the directors feel we should be accountable for each single line item or even contract within the contracted services, yes. On that basis, we would need to do a financial plan amendment. Is it cost effective to do a financial plan amendment anytime we have a $4,000, $5,000, or $9,000 cost increase? No, it is not.
And through the chair,
Sure, go ahead.
Nathan, can you confirm these costs in here don't necessarily include the costs for the additional contractor for the mechanical? So that's just CCAS's oversight and management of portions of it, and then we would still have additional budget that we have not gone in.
I included a rough estimate in the option 2 costs, but that's without going to contractors and saying how much to mow a site 3 times a year. So I did there is a rough estimate of cost in there.
Okay, does that work for you, Director Popoff?
Yeah, it does. It tells me it can be accommodated, but something else will probably have to move eventually. So, and I'm preferring option 2 on this one, but I heard a lot of discussion here about different methods of control or whatever. So the question would be, I wouldn't want to move option 2 because that would involve other resource recovery committees. But would it be possible to move option 2 just for West only?
I'm not going to entertain it, even though I talked about division. I don't think this program is structured that way. I only mentioned that because that is the worst case scenario in my mind, is we start trying to pick and choose every site. I would like to see us vote on option 1 that's on the table and then make a decision from there whether it goes or not. But I don't see this as being appropriate for division. CAO, if you think I'm wrong, tell me.
No, actually, Chair, I'm very good with your explanation or whatever. So, yeah, you know, if we start dividing all those options, whatever, might create a little bit of a quagmire for everybody. So I am not prepared to move any option at this time.
Okay, and we do have a recommendation on the table. So Director Main for the first time, and we have a couple more speakers for the second time, and then maybe we will test the question and move on from there. Director Main.
Yes, thank you. I've been listening attentively to all, the various speakers. And I must say that I am most in concert with Director Watson's remarks. Regarding option one, even though it does, sort of like leave the opportunity to do mechanical rather than chemical, it's coming from a place where chemical is the fallback. That's the option, and you have to prove that something else would work instead of that. I'm really uncomfortable with that as the starting position. I would much rather have preferred to see option two on the table. And I can't support option one. It just, there are too many kind of assumptions behind it that I'm not comfortable with. Thank you.
Thank you. For the second time, Director Vandenberg and then Lockwood, go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. Therein lies the enormity of trying to understand what it is that we're talking about here. I believe that in the right hands of the people who are trained adequately with proper legislation around the control and the use of products, that anything can be used correctly. I also believe that there needs to be ample tools in the toolbox so that you can address those things like invasive weeds. Invasive weeds is a serious thing. Within the report, mechanical control, if done improperly or timed incorrectly, can sometimes result in an increase in an invasive plant. We're in a variety of terrain. You can't mow everywhere. You can use it when you can, but then you've got to reach for another tool in the toolbox. But rest assured that the people that are using the herbicides aren't taking it for granted. They are well trained. They know what they're doing. They know what the application that they're trying to do with that particular plant. So I think we need to give a little bit more credit to those people who work in this industry under the guidance and the requirements that RDCK puts forward, are going to do the best job that they can with the money that we're giving them, which is not much, and to try to control this invasive weed thing that's going crazy. It's exploding. So let's give them the tools they need and let's not restrict them. Let's talk about it again in the future and talk about the successes that we're seeing. Maybe including a herd of goats. I'm in favor of number one.
Thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead, and then we need to go to a vote pretty quick. Go ahead.
Through the chair, just as an example, if we said no herbicide where there's knotweed growing on a site, the alternative would be to haul an excavator to that site and start disturbing the land and digging everything up to try to get those knotweed roots out of the ground, which is a huge disturbance, huge cost, burning diesel. And then also with that, there's no guarantees that we'll get everything. Whereas, a short, brief spot treatment on the growing plants will be way more effective. So, like I say, we have to consider all the options, and herbicide use is just one tool as a whole toolbox for controlling invasives.
I understand option two is limited herbicide use anyway, and it didn't identify cost beyond 60,000. So I'm a little troubled by that analogy of moving the sheet that could cost several thousand on itself. I'm editorializing beyond what I should, I guess. Director Lockwood, and then I'll call for a vote.
Thank you. I understand where CKIS is coming from, is as not, we can look like it's totally removed and come up 500 meters away, and we didn't eradicate the problem and spent the money on that. When we're looking at these two options, as I go through them, there's three that don't have an option two. That's Crawford Bay, HB Tailings, and Marblehead. I should have asked this before, so maybe we would have totally understood, is that if if option one didn't actually get passed, and I'm not saying I'm not in support of it or not, or am in, and option two got put on the table, does that mean that those three spots are not gonna have any work done to them because they don't have an option two? So I would like that clarified before the vote is put to question.
Maybe go to Andy, because that's mechanical.
Through the chair, they would proceed with the single option, the single option that was presented for them.
Mechanical, go ahead,
So-
Nathan.
So HB, there's only been a chemical treatment option recommended for HB. For Crawford Bay, Crawford Bay and Marblehead, only mechanical treatment option has been given the species present on these sites. These are the best options.
Thanks.
Then what I'm understanding is that should actually read option 1/2, that it is for both, because right now it just says option one. So that's not clear in this report.
Noted that there's so many permutations, which is a little bit of my concern if we started amending. However, let's do a test just for something to do. Recommendation before us is option one. I'll call those in favor. So in the room, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 directors in favor. And online,
Peterson opposed?
I have not called for opposed yet, Director Peterson. So in favor online, I see McFadden, DeBoon, Pike, and Lockwood, 4. And Hewitt, 5. Lund in favor. So that's 11. That's carried. I'll call for opposed. I will call for opposed. There's no question. Opposed. So in the room, I have 2 online opposed. I see Maine, Watson, Popoff,
Peterson.
So that is carried, option 1. Thanks, staff. You've given us a set of tools that you're gonna use this year, and be interesting to see what it looks like next year. It is, what are we at? An hour and 40 in. I think everybody should get up and have a stretch before we go to the next item. So what if we come back 11 and a half minutes? 10 to. We'll come back at 2:50.
That'd be 13 minutes.
Yeah, depending on what I'm looking at.
Have to use the internet.
Yes, that's
That out of Preston. Oh, yeah, on the same time.
okay. It's 2:38 something on this one. We will return at 2:50. Thanks, everybody. 2:30. Okay, we're 1 minute from reconvening. If everybody could grab a chair. Okay, so it's 2:50. We'll call the meeting back to order. And we are at item 7, landfill gas feasibility study update. So we have report from Heidi on the item and a recommendation as well. She on the line or? Okay, go ahead, please. Join us now.
Thanks, and through the
Give
chair.
us- Sure, brief overview and then we'll go into questions.
As directed by the board in February 2024, staff reached out to Fortis BC to consider partnering with the RDCK to complete a feasibility study for landfill gas management at Creston and Udashinia landfills. Fortis staff reviewed the available reports for these sites and responded that the size of these landfills and quantities of landfill gas produced are not sufficient to make either landfill an economically viable candidate for a renewable natural gas project. If viable, the generation of carbon offset credits may have potential to make collection and upgrading of landfill gas into RNG more economically viable for smaller landfills, like those in the RDCK. Fortis is currently navigating the regulatory framework to pilot a project of this type. Staff will follow up in 6 months or so for more information. However, there's a limited time frame in which the RDCK may be considered eligible for these kinds of offsets. In early 2024, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities launched a new funding stream through the Green Municipalities Fund, directly related to landfill gas feasibility studies. These organic waste to energy grants provide funding for a much more fulsome business case study than what staff had initially proposed completing with solely the LGCAP funding. This new grant program also offers additional funding for the design, construction, and commissioning of organic waste to energy systems if it's determined that there's a successful business case. Staff consulted 2 qualified professionals who estimated that it would cost up to $35,000 to complete the scope of work outlined for the GMF business case study for both Creston and Udashinia landfills. The GMF grant would cover up to 80% of this, while the RDCK sustainability team indicated that the remaining 20%, so up to $7,000, is eligible to be covered by the RDCK's LGCAP funding. Staff are seeking direction to apply to the FCM Organic Waste to Energy Business Case Grant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So there's the recommendation in the agenda. Are there any questions for staff? Director Vandenberg, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a tough one. It's all about volume. But you don't have what the business case read is from FCM in this report. I would wonder if you have reached out and spoken to Lethbridge, who have gone down this road and are in fact collecting gas and running their buses in the city as a result of it. I remember when I was there visiting with them, it took a long time to have enough organic material decomposed to be able to generate the methane. And so I'm wondering that this activity here now, because I don't know how large of resource we have. I don't think there's going to be enough that it's probably not a good time to spend any money on this. It's just not going to work out in our favor. But once again, I don't know what the business case says because it's not here in front of me for FCM outlining the opportunity. But regardless, they're asking for 20% to come from other sources, presumably from taxpayers, and I think it's a little bit premature, but I could be wrong. Hey, Director Page, I'm checking chat, I see Watson.
Through the chair, the director, we just note that the purpose of the intent as I read the recommendation is to apply for business case grant, develop that business case, and the fund will only be spent should we be successful in the grant.
Still need 5%. So, minimal crosstalk, please. Comments from staff, I guess not. Chair Watson, floor is yours.
Sorry, no comments from staff?
Not at this time.
Okay, sorry.
Correct statement. It is the intent to apply, and we are seeking authorization to apply. If successful and then approved to take the grant, then we would have to contribute up to $7,000 for that study.
Okay, Chair Watson, go ahead.
Thank you. So for the Creston landfill, we are capturing methane. I'm just curious if there was a business case done on that when it was initiated, and is that not, I recall that actually being documented quite well and providing quite significant information regarding the advantages of doing so. And obviously I didn't get through this whole report because I'm asking questions that may have been answered in it. I'm sorry about that, Heidi, if that is the case. There's a lot to read this week and all of our emails coming in. So just curious if you can give me a bit of a comparison to what is occurring in Creston, which I recall being quite successful, and how different this might be.
Absolutely. So Creston currently has a passive flare that just collects the landfill gas and it flows passively to the flare and where it is burned off. Creston is not regulated. So this report kind of ties back to the February landfill gas report where we talked about the incoming regulations. Creston is not regulated to do anything with their gas. So what is going on there is likely sufficient. The purpose of this business case study is more for Udashinya, but we figured if there's potential to tie in and earn offset credits at Creston, because Creston's not going to be regulated, that this study is a way to, this grant would be a way to have that study covered fully by grant funds to evaluate if there could be any opportunity to generate income from landfill gas recovery at that site, as well as at Udashinya.
Supplemental?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Heidi. Good explanation on the differences between what this might assess to what is currently happening. My further question is just that we do know that governments are going to have to, well, we currently do report on our emissions, but we will have to do so more so. So the value I'm seeing this is not, you know, the bonus would be if we can actually recoup some expenses by some kind of value coming back to us because we're doing something with that waste to energy. But is it also going to potentially be one way of reducing emissions for the RDCK that will work in our favor in terms of being carbon neutral? I would assume so, yes, but if you can maybe just elaborate a bit on that, because I think our landfills are part of the biggest component in the regional district that we can actually control. So it's the bigger piece that I'm interested in from our climate action perspective.
Yes, this will, like if successful, implementing landfill gas management would reduce those emissions. And we are going to be regulated to manage that landfill gas in the early 2030s. And so in having an opportunity to have this study funded through a grant, it'll give us the opportunity to learn about what options are best and what are the most economically viable, what are the best environmentally, without and we can get that study done by a qualified professional consultant in this field prior to us kind of scrambling to be forced to implement that system.
May I move the motion, Chair?
Yes, you might. And then I have a couple more speakers. Go ahead.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Seconded. Seconded. Okay, thanks. Director Newell, floor is yours.
Just trying to understand the funding. It seems like it's 100% covered once the report's produced. On page 2, it says the grant is administered 80% paid up front, remaining 20 paid upon submission of an interim and final report deliverables. So it's a zero cost to us ultimately? Through the staff?
So that is 80% of the 80% that would be funded by the grant. And then the remaining 20% of that, the 80%.
Thank you.
Okay, I had a question. The experts or the consultants who do this kind of study, you would have a, pretty broad knowledge of opportunities. So beyond just methane extraction, would they be looking at biomass from ponds and other potential sources, like the viability of a digester on site, like we have at larger sewage treatment plants? Or would it just be confined to landfill gas extraction? How far ranging could this investigation go for this amount of money?
It is my understanding this would be totally focused on landfill gas use. It is my understanding too, and that's why we have to see what our chances in the end really are for success, that in the past, when I looked at GMF funds, they very well looked at opportunities of something that is new and can then be replicated by other local governments. So we'll have to see in how far we qualify under that view, or if this view has changed from 10 years ago when I dealt with GMFs. But it is focused on landfill gas, but I think there is other opportunities than the approach that we took with Fortis, which is really taking landfill gas, treat it to pipeline quality, and use it within Fortis network. There may be simpler options out there, i.e. successful smaller projects in other jurisdictions to use landfill gas for greenhouse projects. So I could see a study going in that direction that is very specific to lower quantity landfills, which obviously would have totally different quantities than we have for our facilities, and options available to larger landfills are not feasible options for us that we can exclude fairly quickly. So I see the study, if it is successful, if our application is successful, being very focused on landfill gas and landfill gas quantities from very small landfills. So below the threshold of regulated landfills that are regulated and mandated to do something with the landfill gas. Timing could be right, because with all the changes in landfill gas regulations and methane control from landfills, we might be just at that timing where these small landfills are captured and pushed towards doing something without being regulated to do something. There was talk about the Creston landfill. Let's be clear, Creston landfill, the only reason why we have in place what we have in place is that we, in the approach that we took with the intention of not having baseliners, we had to go to an aggressive closure project that included membrane coverage systems, which are practically impermeable to gas, which required us to put gas venting systems under the liner. So the gas was there captured. We needed to do something with it. And that's why we have in Creston, with relatively small quantities, a flaring system that addresses 90% of the methane problem.
Okay, thanks. Don't see anyone else in chat. Oh, we'll go to Schmink and then Vandenberg for the second time. Director Schmink.
Thank you. Just curious through to staff. Through to staff, how much time would this take, our understanding the commitment that our staff will have to put towards this?
Heidi, do you know?
I have never done a GMF grant application before. I know Sherry on the sustainability team has, but yeah, I'm not sure hours wise what the commitment would be. I'd imagine not more than a few days of my time.
Further,
That's just the grant application. I'm just thinking about the interaction with the grant writer, not grant writer, but whoever gets the grant. They're gonna want information from our regional district. They're gonna want more details. So there's a whole nother level to this as far as staff time.
I asked before going to, well, go ahead, Heidi, if you have, go ahead.
There is staff time required, but I think one way or another, this is time that will be required of one of our staff's roles because we are going to have to develop landfill gas management. And so this is likely a more efficient way of doing it, or well, it's a more cost efficient way of doing it than having to pay for the whole study ourselves.
What I was gonna ask before going to Director Vandenberg for the second time is there a time sensitivity to putting this application in, or is it wide open through the year to go to GMF? If we wanted more information about internal costs or staff costs, is this time sensitive?
It says that the applications are open until they run out of funding, so there's no deadline.
Thanks, Director Vandenberg.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not gonna try to be a negative Nelly here. It's something we'll look forward to having this opportunity in the future, but until we do some background inquiry as to gauge potential success, and to Amy's comment a little bit earlier, you're at capacity, you don't have any resource, that sort of thing. To do a study now, even in 2023, you're gonna have to redo the study. I just don't, without gauging from others to see where you possibly could lie, which is not in the report. This is kind of a make work project that our time could be spent elsewhere. And forget about the free money. I mean, so what if they got free money? It's not free if you gotta spend a bunch of time and put other things sideways or behind. So just wanted to put that out there. Not that I'm against this whole idea. It's a good idea, I know, but are we ready? Go ahead.
Well, and through the chair, we can add to it if it's different, but one of the, and Heidi, you can correct me, but one of the things is if we end up with a gas management system before it's regulated, we can generate offsets that can help fund the installation of the unit. Once we're regulated, that's just our cost. So I just think that it's not super time sensitive, but the more we don't act on this, the more it's all going to be our cost. So this is one of those items to move things in action and try and do it so that some of the early action can fund the infrastructure costs, which is what a lot of these programs are trying to do. And it sounded like Heidi had some interaction with some federal staff and identified they've actually moved some of the deadlines of these to try and help smaller landfills and local governments get these things in place to generate those funds to help fund these things so that it's less of an economic impact when it comes to being regulated to do it.
Go ahead.
And I believe that's where US directors need to decide where you're intending to go, is that we do as an organization have made some commitments in regards to mitigating our emissions as an organization, and this is one option. And so far, if we are honest, the landfill gas project in Creston was really the only one large project that has helped us as an organization to reduce our emissions. Everything else we may have done, we more than ate up as part of growing as an organization. And so I guess it's really, it fits into the picture of an intended greenhouse gas mitigation program But if this is not a priority to us, then I agree, this is not what we want to pursue.
Go to Director Newell for the first time then once. Go ahead, please.
Do we have a motion on the floor?
The board recommendation is moved.
It's moved and
Moved and seconded.
Thanks, I just lost.
The staff recommendation, sorry. It's moved and seconded.
No, I'm good.
Okay, Chair Watson, for the second time, we're close perhaps, and we'll have a vote. Go ahead.
Sure, and Chair, you might consider this, I don't know if it's a question that resource recovery staff can answer, but when it comes to, is this a priority for us? Frankly, I'm just going to reiterate that if we are committed to being environmental stewards, working with our own emissions is where we should be solely focusing, and this is 100% the way we do that. I would favor this over having anything to do with electric vehicles when it comes to environmental impacts and commitments. So my question is just when it comes back to, I think Heidi had indicated that, you know, the feasibility study will essentially tell us how we could do this. It's not going to tell us we can't do it. It's going to tell us how we can do it. And then what are those costs? And then what are the potential benefits of doing it? And then we determine, are we going to do it? My assumption is that with the amount of emissions that are occurring from our landfills, that the ability to capture those and then make energy out of them is a significant impact to our emission levels. Would that not be, and this is the question, Chair, that you can deem out of order if you'd like, because it could be someone else's department, would that not be the majority of the emissions that our corporate reports have indicated we create? Would this not be mitigating most of those if we can actually do this at both of those landfills? And that's my close. I'm in support of it. I think this is the way we should be approaching climate change from an emissions perspective, and you know, all the other things we're doing as well, but this is the biggest one for me. It's our landfills, it's how we control it. It directly reduces emissions with tangible metrics. And you can create energy, which in our world, we're going to need more of.
So I don't think we're going to get a hard answer because small fleet, waste hauling vehicles, large industrial equipment for working at landfills, and whether or not transit buses are all hung on us or what percentage could well exceed in that thing. So I don't know, but do you have a sense of methane's relative total impact versus vehicle emissions?
So I'm hesitant to answer this because we have not had any direction to aggressively look at doing our business differently than we are doing it today. So what I have observed, and I wasn't part of that, but what I have observed was that we actually, as an organization, had already serious discussion about should we have one of our fleet vehicles being an electric vehicle or not. If we are serious about that too, and quite frankly, in the background, we do some investigation what options are out there. But if we are serious about changing how we do business, in changing and converting our fleet, and this is clearly a 5 to 10 year process at least, and technologies are changing daily in that regard, then I would appreciate if we strategically look at this as an organization and direct the Resource Recovery Committee, department, to seriously put effort behind this and put options before you. That is a major undertaking, and like I said, technology is changing. We are seeing equipment on the electrical side. There is a movement in regards to hydrogen. There's conversion to natural gas, and there's options out there, but it is not what I feel we have seen to be directed in that direction. And yeah.
So the answer would have to be you can't make the comparison.
At this point, I don't have enough information to give you anything in that regard because we have not taken significant steps to investigate that.
So I kind of want to call the vote on this, but.
Very true. Can I just clarify that was not what I was suggesting, that we go down that road? I think I was not well understood, but we can just leave it.
Sorry, this was not in regards to your comment, Director Watson. It was when the chair summarized that in regards to are we better off or do we achieve higher diversion or reductions in CO2 emissions going the conventional route of our current operations versus the landfill gas? That's what I understood. And if I misunderstood that, I'm sorry.
But I don't think there's an answer to your question. It is, every study we've seen says transportation is one of our biggest CO2 emitters, period, across the board.
It is.
And that's what we're addressing with this small step. Director Schmidt, prior to going to a vote.
Thank you. Not opposed to going in this direction, but somebody else brought up electric cars. Well, in 10 years, electric cars went from being a nuisance to actually being quite, I mean, you could go 60 miles. And if you're lucky, you might get home. But I mean, or kilometers, they weren't very much. And now they're a viable alternative to gasoline or internal combustion engines. I just don't want to be the ones investing in that 60-kilometer vehicle. We have some time. Why wouldn't we wait until let somebody else be the guinea pig and develop the new systems? We're not like Vancouver or big cities. We're small, and there's going to be. It's going to take some real innovation. And where are we going with this? And I'd much rather see somebody else make the mistakes and then copy the successes than us make the mistakes. That's just where I'm coming from.
So I have led us sideways. Methane capture is common, at least, though, not for our size landfill. So the recommendation, staff recommendation, I will look for all in favor of the recommendation. From the room, I see 1, 2, 3, 4. Online, I see Lockwood, Watson, Hewitt, Cunningham, Lund, Selsnet. And so we have 12 in favor, opposed to the recommendation. Sorry, 1, 2, 3 in the room, online, so that is carried. So we will be looking at methane capture, or at least it'll go to board tomorrow.
We will write an application.
Write the application to look at it. Baby steps. Okay, item 8, we've got 8, 9, 10. Roll-off bin purchases. Larry is not in today, I understand. Amy, you want a quick polls note?
Yes.
We need a half a dozen of these, 2 for each.
Thank you. This is pretty straightforward. We use these bins across our district to move waste, and we need some rolling stock replacements, and have these actually in the budget for carried over a year or two now. So we issued the RFP, or the invitation to quote, sorry. We had 4 bids, 1 was disqualified, so the 3 remaining bids were evaluated. The points are demonstrated, and so the highest scoring points fell at 100. That was Fusion West, and it fell to 103,444, which is within our budget, combined budget of 120,000. So each subregion will be getting 2 bins up to we had budgeted up to $48,000. So this meets our budget and meets the needs for the asset replacement. So we are requesting authorization to purchase the 6 bins from Fusion West Manufacturing.
So questions for staff or the recommendation is there if anybody wants to go to that, and I have to just check.
Director Popoff will move the recommendation.
Do we have a second? Okay, and then I see speakers list. Watson, please go ahead.
Thank you, and I seem to be joining you on the going down the rabbit holes here, so hopefully this doesn't do that. But I recall when we had issues with haulers last summer, which was just a mix of illness and whatnot, that the style of bin we had was part of the problem in terms of procuring extra haulers. So I just wanted to verify that. I always trust staff are doing the best to give us the best recommendations. I don't doubt that, but I do recall the roll-off bins having some potential issues. So I'm curious if you can speak to that, Amy.
Amy, go ahead, please.
Thank you through the chair. So our central subregion hauling fleet uses the Dempster style hoist system, which is not what's used in the other two subregions, nor by most other commercial haulers in the area. We are working to see if we can get dual style. However, it is the rails on the bottom largely of the bin unit, the way that it attaches to the truck. And so not as easy to go between those two systems. We asked for pricing for all the three different styles of hoist systems. They're actually fairly cost comparable, and we are looking at whether or not we can get the bins in the west and the east are not of concern. The one is for the central subregion. I think what we're going to have to do in the situation is when we start to buy new roll-off trucks, we start to transition, and we can then weld the different mounting systems on the bins and modify the bins as we go. So the bins can be modified later once we have trucks that can haul them. So it is something that's in our plan for asset replacement to start to transition the central subregion out of that solo style of bin hoist, because it does complicate it so that we can't just contract the work out as easily. So that is something that's in our work plan. It's not the actual roll-up bin itself, it's the hoist system on our trucks that was the issue.
Supplemental?
Sure, go ahead.
Sorry. So I believe what you're saying, Amy, is that is being accounted for within this, and that these bins that would be purchased will have a life expectation where we can modify them, and we're not then buying different bins for a new hauling truck, correct?
Through the chair, correct, but the bins would require modification for a different style. It would require some welding of the bin, but we could still use the bin on a future bin truck style.
And maybe to add to this, there is as well a possibility when we transition over that we use a certain style of truck and bins on a specific route and use for other purposes the newer truck and the newer bins. So we may not have to necessarily modify them, but that is to be determined when it actually comes to that point.
Further discussion on the recommendation? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? There's lag on the screen again. I should wait a little bit. So that is, we'll move to board more as well. Item 9 is Kokanee Creek Marina Recycling Depot. Kane, thank you. Prepared the report on this, and I guess a few things are in flux there, or changing at that site. Quick sort of summary, please, on where we're at right now.
Sure, thank you. Through the chair, today I'd like to present an update on the change of ownership of Kokanee Creek Marina Recycling Depot, and I'd like to obtain the direction from the Transport Recovery Committee for future operation of this location. As it was passed in the February by the board that we're closing the Kokanee Creek Marina Depot permanently, and the staff are preparing to permanently close the depot by the 31st of May. However, the owner of the Kokanee Creek Marina actually has sold the business to the new owner, who is now willing and able to comply with the RDCK's contractual requirements, and he's willing to keep the depot there if the RDCK and the community surrounding the area are wishing so. And the RDCK is, as you know, hosting the referendum in electoral area H and F in May 11th. And this is for the 3-3 curbside collection services. And also the results from giving the assessment and system sufficiency review will be presented at the Joint Resource Recovery Committee in May. Further financial analysis indicated that financial plan amendment will not be required, although the budget associated with the Kokanee Creek Depot was reduced from the central sub-region budget for 2024. And we estimated that the operational cost for Kokanee Creek Recycling Depot will be approximately $8,700 if we stay open the depot for additional 2 months. Then staff recommended to amend the staff is now recommending to amend the board resolution from February and request the board to approve the extension of the lease agreement with the new owner until July 31st, 2024, and return the JRC meeting for direction on future operation of the depot based on new information at the June JRC meeting. And with this recommendation, we have pros and cons, of course. And pros is we get 2 month extension given for us to determine the most cost-effective decision based on the results from the referendum, as well as the finalized report from the tipping fee assessment study. And the cons is, of course, the cost savings. If we close the depot, then we could save that $8,700. And option 2 will be, we're just gonna go with the resolution made in February. And pros for this will be, we'll be able to do save the cost for that. And cons, the results from the referendum, as well as the tipping fee system efficiency study may affect the decision of closing the depot permanently. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So questions for staff or recommendations? Director Buell. Do we have a second for the staff recommendation to amend? Schmink, thank you. And discussion on the recommendation. Don't see anything in chat, don't see any hands in the room. We'll vote, all in favor, 2 month extension. Any opposed? So that is carried. We'll go to board tomorrow as well. Thanks very much.
Vote tomorrow, Chair?
Board. Oh, sorry.
On this motion, is it board motion or is it a?
CO.
The chair, it's an agreement. So we don't-
Thank you.
Contract. Okay. Good point. Question. So we are at, whoops, it's folded the heading over. Item 10, 2023 Recycle BC summary report, or sorry, it's not recycle, it is the Recycling Council of British Columbia, RCBC. Not to be confused with the other. They have a summary of all their communications, which were numerous. I actually have here as well. Thanks. For information, I'd rather get information about how they're gonna give us more money for the stuff we collect.
That's the other one.
But that's the other side, that other RBC ones.
So
Any questions about the report? Go ahead.
I find it's prepared.
Okay, please, go ahead with the summary. Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair again. So Recycle Council of BC is the organization that provides extensive services to any residents in British Columbia. And they provide most up-to-date information regarding any recycling and disposal options, and that's area specific. So I don't know if you use it. They use search engine for Recyclopedia. So you can download an app or you can use it online. You can specify your location and items you'd like to search, and they'll tell you exactly what you can bring or what your alternative option if the location is not available. And the RDCK has been an active member of Recycle Council of British Columbia. And in 2024, the Information Services Program fee for the RDCK is about $2,206. And the annual membership fee is $225. This brings to the total of $2,431 for our contribution towards this service. And in 2023, Recycle Council of British Columbia has received over 290,000 inquiries from the website and phone calls, and also the Recyclopedia app. And for the RDCK, we have made 2,882 inquiries to this service, and which is about 1.23% of the population in the RDCK use this service. And according to Recycle Council of BC annual report, the inquiries made from the RDCK last year consist of 1.05% of the total inquiries made throughout British Columbia. And the summary of call volumes for the RDCK showed that the most amount of calls were received from Nelson and Kasika, and also Preston, Nebraska, and Salmo respectively. And I'd like to present top 5 materials that were inquired from the RDCK because this is very interesting compared to what the provincial averages were for those top 5. So for the RDCK, the most amount of inquiries are made for tires, electronics, oils, paint, and batteries. In comparison, for British Columbia provincial average was about, for the first one was tires, and second one textiles, and plastics for the third one, and pressurized cylinders, and household furniture was the fifth. So compared to what they received provincial-wide, compared to what RDCKs received was inquiring, it's quite obvious that it's all in VBR programs related items that our residents want to know about. And so in 2024, the Recycle Council BC has granted grants from the provincial government that they can further expand the services. So this year they're trying to improve their database and add more information regarding reuse and repair locations or options in the search areas, and adding online chat functions, and trying to improve reporting and communication systems with the account managers delegated to the region. So then the most up-to-date region-specific information can be posted instead of really outdated. In RDCK, as I mentioned earlier, only 1.23% of the population is currently using. So I really love to promote this year for our residents to use this service more. So I'd love to update the website page, including this option for the residents to use. And also I'd love to promote this service to other facilities such as Nelson Leafs Eco Depot and other municipalities website. The RDCK staff will be actively engaging with the account manager from Recycle Council BC regarding any changes in our accepted materials or our facilities, and also if we add new locations in our region, so there'll be more up-to-date information.
Great, thank you. Questions about the program? Any comments? One, but Director Vandenberg, go ahead.
Well, at first I didn't really understand why would you even bother with any of this, but I guess I could see the value of it. It'll be interesting to see how many years before we start seeing solar panels on there. Inquiries as to what to do, recycling, and other things like that.
Cunningham, Director Cunningham, question. And then I have Lockwood in the chat as well. I see there.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see the information, but quite frankly, I also think in a way, it's good to see that everybody in the province is doing this and coming on board. And somewhere in my mind saying, well, thank you for sending all this stuff out. Why Recycling Council BC don't you do something to help us recycle and rather than just tell us how we're doing? I mean, this is sort of like sending us a report card before we've actually got the information and got the work done. You know, I sort of bang my head when I see things like this, and I appreciate the fact that staff has taken time to analyze it and help us out. But really, I mean, 3 different graphs showing us way things are done around the province and who's doing them and the percent that we're doing. Oh, come on, this is a little bit of a waste of time. Thank you.
Sure, yes.
I do want to make sure that everyone's really clear that this is not Recycle BC. They're not an EPR program. They very much are an information sharing database essentially. And so they're there for any resident to ask about any material. They're funded by regional districts of province, and I believe some of the EPR programs. And what I do think the value of it is it shows where residents are not sure how to take materials and helps us with education. And they share this information with the EPR programs to show like no one knows in the district how to use your EPR programs on their own. They have to contact us. So it does provide us with that feedback to gauge education and communications, both with residents and with the EPR program. So they're quite excited about this new database and all the things that they can do with it. But what I'm really excited about as well is that they've got a really keen interest in circular economy and not just expanding for recycling or, you know, sharing information about recycling, but sharing information on reuse and repair. And they see that this is an area where they can really support the province. So I think that that's an area where I would like to really encourage them to support us on.
Supplementary, Chair. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. It's not that I disagree with the idea of disseminating information and so forth. And what I am saying is, yeah, well, that's very nice. And I know it's the information section. That's not the point. But the point being that could we be doing things better in the information section? And sending out this thing that says, listen, there were, what, 32 requests from so-and-so and 97 from Castlegar, et cetera. Well, that's probably because Castlegar has more people than, say, Salmo or Quartz Creek or whatever. And I, you know, that's understood. But I'm sorry, out of all the work we do somewhere along here, I think that this could be done a little bit more easily in a one-pager, saying here's where we are, but what we really need to do is concentrate our efforts on recycling batteries or tires or whatever the case may be. And here's the way to help do it, rather than just this kind of information. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, okay. So this is not all the information we are getting from them. There's as well information that is material specific, so it can actually be an indicator for us how well certain programs do in regards to reaching the public or not reaching the public. So if you, i.e., see that the vast majority of inquiries is coming about tires, then you know that the tire program has an issue in reaching the public. And we can use that information to go and say, it's time that you do more intensified public education program and reach the public, right? So there's other information components for us as staff, at least, that are valuable and that we use to gauge how well they're doing.
Chair, as a final, yes, I don't
Sure.
agree with that. But the question, can you demonstrate to me, say, some of the programs where we have used that information in the way that Willie has just described? Oh, okay.
He's looking for a specific example.
Yes,
But maybe that would be offline.
yeah, it's all right, Chair. I think the point has been made.
Hi, through the chair. So some specific examples how this information can be reached to each EPR program is that, for example, if the RTCK resident inquire about any locations available for example, oils and paint in Creston, and certainly the answer is no at the Recycle Council BC site as well. So after that, they highly likely reach out to EPR program because they don't have answer to it. And then that question will be relayed to them, means that indicate then that the Creston is lacking a service. So that's a really good, to me, line of communication.
Okay, thank you. Maybe go to Director Lockwood now. Go ahead.
Thank you. And just want to make a comment about this report. This report, yes, it gives us a lot of indication of what people are not understanding or asking questions about. But what I see out of this report is another download from the province that we are to make sure that the residents in our area have enough communication from us about what they should be recycling and not, which puts another responsibility onto us, which I feel that we keep accepting these and not pushing back saying, thanks for the information. Now you know, as a province, or as a council, what you need to educate for this area. That's just my input on this report. I appreciate all the information, but I do think that them telling us that you guys aren't doing a good enough job.
Valid response, totally agree.
Sometimes so unavoidable, it seems. I was gonna make one observation, anything that's 1 point some% of the population participating in either means we all get it, we don't need this service, or we don't even know it exists, and I suspect it's the latter. That people don't even know where to go to ask the question in the first place, and again, that's part of what we can help with, I suppose. Amy?
So through the chairs, the number for the Recycling Council of BC is actually on all of our new site signs and on our website. So we are trying to get the message out, and it's not their mandate to educate the public. Their mandate is to share information and let those that educate the public know where the information is needed.
And this is maybe as well a function out of the systemic problem of the multitude of EPR programs. If we would have, and Alberta is somewhat better than that, than BC in that regard. If we would have 5 EPR programs, that's one thing, but having
many,
I don't even know the number, of EPR programs, it is difficult for residents to find the information they need. And here is one location where they can get information about all programs. And unfortunately, that's the situation that we are in, and that was commented to the province 25 years ago, that that's not the right route to go down, but that is what we have right now and need to live with.
So glad you're making signs, and the font of this phone number is gonna be bigger than our phone number. That'll be perfect. So I'm gonna move to item 11, and I'm gonna observe that Shanna, of the hundreds of times you've done this, we have this little thing going on, like this morning, Christine and I did not want to predict how long rural affairs was gonna take. But Shanna interestingly put under item 11 that at approximately 3:45, we would call for questions from the public. So at 3:40, pretty good, you've been doing this for a while, sorry to be losing you.
And it might be the last time, yeah.
That's why I'm making a big point about it. At 3:40, there is still public on the line, I believe. Are there any, there's no public in the room. Any questions from the public online for this committee? Just give people a second to unmute if you have a question. I'm not sure who all is there. I'm just gonna do, so not hearing any. Item 12, I look for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded without objection. We are adjourned at 3:41. Thanks very much, everybody. Lots of items today.
Can I say?
Wait.
You said it. It's done.